If you've followed me for a while, you know that I absolutely love infrared saunas, right? But what if you don't have an infrared sauna available to you? Or what if there's no room in your apartment for a sauna? Well, I have the perfect solution for you. Infrared sauna mat. So you can just come home and while you're watching Netflix, you can just turn it on and have access to an infrared sauna right in the comfort of your own home. I use mine all year long, but it is especially cozy in these winter months that are coming up. So if you're interested in finding out more and getting a little discount with your infrared sauna mat, I mean, what better gift do you want to give yourself with the little detoxification that you can do every night if you want? Check out the link below to learn more. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. You are listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and we are back for another week. So this week I've got someone new, but actually someone that I met through a mastermind. Her name is Kate Vasquez. She's a physician assistant, and we are talking all about her really amazing book. It's called Estrogen is a Bitch. And so today we're talking all about estrogen dominance, why you have it, some things you can do, what supplements to take, what foods you should be avoiding. I mean, we talked about so many things. And then also, did you know that it's related to insulin resistance and your sugar levels and your sugar intake? So we're going to talk all about that and figure out ways, easy ways that you can monitor your sugar levels. So without further ado, on to the show. All right, welcome back to another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I have a new guest today, Kate Vasquez. She's a functional medicine physician assistant, also the founder of Radiant Health and author of Estrogen is a Bitch. So thank you so much, Kate, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, for having me. I'm just so blessed and honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. So today we are talking all about estrogen and estrogen dominance. It's such a common topic, and I see it all the time with my patients. So I think that would be a great topic for today. So why don't we start out with some of the symptoms of estrogen dominance?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely really important to understand what are the symptoms, because when we say estrogen dominance, it's a big term. Sometimes it's more of a medical term, and a lot of women are not really sure, like, what is estrogen dominance? And is this something that I really have? And basically, estrogen dominance is going to be an imbalance of estrogen in ratio to progesterone, especially during a specific time of the cycle. But there are a lot of different symptoms associated with estrogen dominance that I'll commonly see in my clients. And I realized there were 5 telltale signs. And those are irregular periods, heavy periods, PMS symptoms, breast tenderness, and weight gain. And so to start, I will typically see a lot of irregular periods because throughout the month, our hormones are constantly fluctuating. Right. So when we have our periods, that's when our hormones are at the lowest level. And it's not until right before ovulation where estrogen starts to peak. And that's because it's to help the egg to be released during ovulation. It's also to help prepare the endometrium endometrium to get our bodies ready for pregnancy if a fertilized egg happens. And then right after ovulation, estrogen does start to come down, and then progesterone starts to peak. But we also get a little bit of a bump in estrogen during our luteal phase, which is the second half of our menstrual cycle. So when I'm looking at the hormones, I'm looking at that luteal phase. And when women are having irregular periods, I want to know what's happening with their hormones, because there are 3 different types of estrogen dominance patterns that I'll see. And so I'm looking to see if they have that specific type of pattern, because if they are, for example, there's 2 patterns that have low progesterone levels. One is normal levels of estrogen, and the other one is high. So if their progesterone levels are low and it's not peaking, but they have a lot of estrogen in their system, that's actually causing a delay of menstruation. So that's why women will typically have really long cycles or really irregular cycles every time of the month because of that. And then the next symptom is heavy periods. So when there is excess amount of estrogen, what happens is, as I mentioned, estrogen is helping to prepare the endometrial lining. It's causing thickening of that. So when there's a lot of estrogen in the system, the lining will be even thicker, more thicker than normal. And so when that happens, when women finally do have their period, they're having really heavy periods. And sometimes they're seeing clots associated with that. So that's also another big telltale sign of estrogen dominance. And then those PMS symptoms too, that can occur, such as the severe menstrual cramps, which a lot of women were told are normal, but they're not normal. We shouldn't be suffering every single month, with severe debilitating menstrual cramps. And then the mood swings that come along with that. And so the cramps are occurring because normally prostaglandins are released when we menstruate, because these prostaglandins create inflammation and causes the uterus to contract so we can shed that endometrial lining. But when there's a lot of excess estrogen in the system, it will increase more prostaglandins, which causes more painful cramps. And then the mood swings are associated with those lower levels of progesterone. So if women have low levels compared to high estrogen, they're going to get the anxiety, the depression. They're also going to have trouble sleeping, the headaches, or they're going to have more of those mood swings and PMS symptoms associated with that as well. And then the breast tenderness can occur because estrogen is responsible for helping the tissue in the breast to grow and develop, especially as we go through puberty. But when there's excess amount, women will start to notice that tenderness and swelling of their breast, because that excess estrogen causes that tissue to swell even more. Tissue it fills up with a lot of fluid. So that's why a lot of women will experience breast tenderness right before, especially during that luteal phase. When there's a lot of estrogen in the system, they'll have those tender breasts right before they start their period. And then the last symptom is weight gain. And there's a very classic distribution of weight gain associated with estrogen dominance, and that's in the butt, hips, and thighs. And because when we go through puberty, women naturally develop curves in the butt, hips, and thighs. It does help give us our curves. But again, when there's excess amount of estrogen in the system, that's where a lot of women tend to gain a lot of their weight. So when women find that when they gain a lot of weight and it's going mostly into the butt, hips, and thighs, it's really important they look at their hormones and making sure that their estrogens, there's not too much in the system or it's imbalanced. So those are the 5 top telltale signs of estrogen dominance. And usually when women have about 2 or more of those symptoms, we can definitely start thinking about, is there an imbalance or is there excess amount of estrogen that we need to support? But then there's also other symptoms too associated with it, such as brain fog, bloating, fatigue, also acne, low libido, and even trouble conceiving. Some women will have issues with infertility, trouble conceiving because their estrogens are imbalanced.
So I wanted to just circle back to having the clotting and having lots of clotting. Are you also seeing fibroids too with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So fibroids is an estrogen dominant condition. So when there's excess estrogen in the body, it can contribute to estrogen dominant conditions such as uterine fibroids, endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, because in the case of the uterine fibroids, all that excess estrogen is causing the growth of that tissue to contribute to those fibroids.
Yes, it's so amazing to me because I work with so many women who have hormonal issues, and they'll tell me that they've had fibroids for a long time. And one of the most common ways that they're being told from their GYN is to surgically remove them. And without the discussion about progesterone, and it is, progesterone is a calming hormone. It's what helps you sleep at night. It what helps balance your hormones, and balance the estrogen. So when you've got a lot of high estrogen, low progesterone, that's when you get all of these estrogen dominant symptoms. But it is amazing to me that, give women progesterone. I'm not sure if it's not taught in medical school or like what is going on, but I find that even that simple, little bit of, I do compounding. So I go to compounding pharmacies for my progesterone. Now, and I will say that it's progesterone and not progestin. Progestins are synthetic, and I would stay away from those. But progesterone is so ideal. It's so beneficial with women with estrogen dominance that I find that it hardly ever gets addressed. It's like, oh, okay, let's just schedule you for surgery. I mean, depending, when you have a huge, big fibroid, of course, sometimes those, you can easily palpate them right through the abdomen. And sometimes they do need to come out. But if you have these smaller-ish fibroids, sometimes progesterone can definitely help with that heavy bleeding, with the heavy clotting, with the tender breasts. And, it does amaze me that it's hardly ever utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you're saying. It's because of that imbalance. And another thing that I like to look at is like, why are the progesterone levels low? What's causing that? What's driving that? Because sometimes in women, it could be an adrenal issue where their bodies are just under a lot of stress. Right. And so because when our bodies are under stress, we're sending signals to the adrenal glands to produce more cortisol. And actually, let me back that up, because it's like when we think about what produces the stress hormone, cortisol, and what produces our sex hormones, progesterone and testosterone, estradiol, they're all coming from cholesterol. So now the body has to decide like which hormone is it going to put more energy towards producing more of. And so when our bodies are under stress, of course, it's going to go direct more to producing more of that stress hormone, because now we're in that fight or flight mode. And so our bodies are going to be focused on that. And it's not going to be focused on reproduction and producing those sex hormones,
Exactly.
So it's like, so that's one thing I'm like, look at is like when my clients are coming in, their progesterone levels are low and causing that imbalance with the estrogen. Like, why is it low in the first place? And can we address that piece and see if we can get progesterone levels up? Sometimes I'll also use some herbs and nutrients and stuff too, to really help support the production of that. And then if that doesn't work, then yeah, definitely the next step is adding in that progesterone. Like you said, there is a difference between compounded plant-based progesterone versus the synthetic progestin, because it's actually exactly the same hormone that our body produces versus the synthetic one, which is similar, but it's not the same, and it can cause a lot of side effects.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Okay. So let's say a woman is like, oh my God, I have this every month. I have really bad PMS. I have such tender breasts. I've gained weight. What's going on? Aside from progesterone, what else do you do?
Oh yeah. I like to dive in and really take a look at the whole body and all the different systems. So the first thing I like to look into is the gut, because it's really important to assess gut health, because we have something called the estrobolome, which is estrogen and microbiome combined together. And the estrobolome is really important because there's these healthy gut bacteria that help to get rid of that estrogen. So when estrogen is being metabolized, it starts in our liver. there's phase 1 and phase 2 in the liver. It turns the active form of estrogen into its inactive form, and then it binds to bile and goes straight to our intestines. So it's very important that once it reaches the intestines, it's going out. And so we want to have a healthy, robust microbiome and have that bacteria that's helping to facilitate that process. But if that's not happening because we have poor gut health, then we have something called beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that's supposed to be low levels. But if there's disruption of the gut microbiome, it's going to cause increased elevation of this enzyme, and it's going to convert that inactive estrogen back to its active form. And so that's another thing that's really, really important to address, because we don't want estrogen being recirculated back into our bodies. We need to use it and get rid of it. We don't want excess hanging around and continuing to get used. And so gut health is the first thing I like to address, is like, how healthy is the gut, the microbiome? Do we need to support digestion? Do we need to get rid of some bad bacteria, repopulate the gut and all that? So that's the first thing I like to address. And then nutritional deficiencies as well. Looking at the different nutrients to make sure, like if their progesterone levels are low, B6 and vitamin C are two very, very important nutrients that are needed for that. And then addressing the adrenals, like I mentioned previously, figuring out, like, do they have a lot of stress in their life? And are they doing anything to manage the stress? Because again, the body's going to be not focusing on producing enough of that progesterone and more of the stress hormones. So really addressing that part of it. And also insulin resistance too. So that's another thing, like looking at the nutrition. So looking at what are the women eating? Are they eating a lot of refined carbs and sugars that's contributing to insulin resistance? Because it's not in the papers yet, but because I looked up specifically estrogen dominance and insulin resistance, and you won't find anything. But we do know that insulin resistance, when women have that, they start to gain weight. And when they gain weight, they increase fat cells, and fat cells produce more estrogen. And so that, I do believe, is contributing to estrogen dominance as well. So we really need to take a look at the glucose response and insulin, is someone developing insulin resistance, and get them to become sensitive again, because I do believe that's another missing piece that's not being looked at and addressed as well. And then also focusing back on the foods too, making sure that they're not consuming meats that have a lot of hormones in them and a lot of pesticides, because those tend to add to those excess exogenous, meaning coming from the outside in, all these exogenous hormones, and then the pesticides that are, estrogens, and they're affecting our gut and all that too. So really looking into that piece, and also looking at what they're using in their homes too, because that's going to be important. All these toxins and chemicals and things that are xenoestrogens, these compounds that mimic estrogen, attached to the same estrogen receptors in our body. And so sometimes that can create, or the body thinks that there is more estrogen in the system than there really is. So really looking into these different pieces is going to be key as well.
Yes, I love that. And, the other thing that no one ever checks is insulin levels. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't this ever get checked? It's definitely part of what I do for blood work, but I don't know, maybe conventional medicine doesn't know how to treat insulin resistance, because I really only treat that with supplements, and pretty much just supplements. There's no prescription, anything. So I feel like if there's no prescription for something, let's not even check it, because we're not really sure how to, there is, if someone has metabolic syndrome, or, borderline, like hemoglobin A1C is at like 5.7 or 8 or 9 even, then they put them on the metformin. But I want insulin levels checked, fasting insulin from early 30s, so we can keep tabs of it, because before something becomes diabetes, let's be proactive and do something about it. It just never gets checked. It's frustrating for me, because I see a lot of women who have never had certain tests done. And that's like the key, is to really figuring out what labs and getting them done and being proactive with everything rather than waiting until you have a car wreck and then you're like, oh, now I guess we have to do something about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I check fasting insulin on every single client, the fasting insulin, fasting glucose, the hemoglobin A1C, because it's so, so important. It's like, if we know a lot of these chronic disorders is a result of insulin resistance, why not we check these markers now and prevent these things from happening, and it's, if you are working with a provider, another thing that I do too, and actually Freestyle Libre is a continuous glucose monitor. They offer one free reader and one free sensor. You can get a voucher online. It does require a prescription. So if you're working with a practitioner that's able to write a prescription for you, I highly, highly recommend it, especially someone who's open to it. Now, a lot of old school practitioners may say, no, continuous glucose monitoring is only for diabetics, but I would say, no, exactly. I'm like, if we're thinking prevention, like it should be for everybody, because even if you get this sensor, which is good for 2 weeks, you can learn so much about your body and how it responds to glucose. And by doing this, and this is what I have my clients do, even just for 2 weeks, it's been such an eye opener for them. And they realize, they're like, wow, I didn't know this food, causes a spike. Like I had a client who was like, I was drinking diet soda. And she's like, even though it has no sugar, she's like, it spiked my glucose. I'm like, exactly. And I'm glad you were able to see that response yourself, because otherwise she wouldn't have known. She would have continued to drink, the diet soda that would have impacted her glucose long-term. And so I do believe, like, if you can find a practitioner that's willing to do this and at least, prescribe the continuous glucose monitor, even if it's for 2 weeks, you can learn so much about your body and figure out the best. And the goal at the end of the day is to figure out the best foods for your body, because we're all different, we are also different. We all respond differently. And I had another client, for example, she did the continuous glucose monitor and she tested it out. She had an apple with almond butter and it spiked. But then when she ate banana with almond butter, it actually did not spike her glucose. And you would think it would be the opposite because banana has more sugar. But that doesn't necessarily mean, just because it has more sugar, it doesn't mean your glucose is going to spike. So that's why it's important to do the testing. So then now instead of guessing, now you really understand and
Right, exactly. So something even healthy that you're like, well, how can, this is, I don't know, some veggie, but it could spike you and it could, but the next person, it won't affect them at all. So I think that actually I was going to, it was through this place, the Freestyle. I had I think I had the voucher for it, and I still have to do it. Like, it's literally still sitting at the pharmacy, I believe. And so I want to do that. The ones you put back here, right?
Yes. Yeah. You put it on your arm and you leave it on for 2 weeks. Yeah. You should totally do it. I just got mine too. So I'm going to do that as well. Cause I'm like, I've seen such a dramatic improvement in my clients. And I'm like, okay, I just need to do this myself as well. Cause I'm always looking for ways and things to do to optimize my health long-term. And it's such a valuable test.
And because it's so, having elevated glucose is not good for anyone. It's one of the things that I just, when I do my insulin levels on my patients, if they're too high, we talk about food, but this test, to doing it for 2 weeks, it'll give you an idea of something that may be majorly spiking, like close to 200, which is not what you want, because ultimately, if you keep getting close to 200, then your hemoglobin A1C numbers are going to be elevated as well. But this way, you'll be able to point out, like, oh my God, it was the Brussels sprouts. I mean, I'm just making it up, but
right.
And then you can't really eat it that often, or have it with, next time maybe have it with steak and see if it helps. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you can't eat it by itself, pair it with a fat and protein, and that usually helps to balance it out. But if it still spikes even with the fat and protein, then that's probably a no-go for you.
Right. Exactly. All right. So let's see. What about, breakthrough bleeding after menopause? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, breakthrough bleeding with menopause. It's important to get the hormones checked out, because when they go through menopause, I know that the first hormone to decline is progesterone. So that then right there will create an estrogen dominance effect.
Right.
And so it's important that women are getting their hormones checked out, and even more reason for them to get onto the progesterone to help balance that out. But yeah, if there is breakthrough through bleeding, it's definitely still important to get that hormones checked out, but also make sure that there's not risk of cancer as well. Because that usually when it's like, if you're bleeding out of the blue and you're in menopause, that's one of the biggest things that I recommend to check out, because estrogen does get metabolized into, well, I'm going to take a step back. There are different types of estrogen. There's estradiol and estrone, which can definitely be easily checked via blood work. And what I like to see is high levels of estradiol compared to estrone. So if we're seeing the opposite, higher levels of estrone compared to estradiol, that means we need to support estrogen metabolism, because estrone goes to produce 3 different metabolites. And I know in some states, they can do testing to actually test those metabolites. I know you being in New York, you may not necessarily have access to those tests, but if you do know that the estrone is higher, you can still take the steps to help support the metabolism of that, because those there are 3 metabolites. The first one is called 2-hydroxyestrone, which is actually protective of our DNA. And we really want to support higher levels of that to really reduce the risk. And a supplement I like to recommend to support that pathway is called DIM. And then there are 2 other metabolites, 16-alpha hydroxyestrone, which can increase proliferation of cancer cells. And so it's important to assess gut health. So if that metabolite is high, again, the importance of going back and looking at the gut is to make sure we don't have higher levels of that 16-alpha, which will increase the growth of those cells. And then the third metabolite is 4-hydroxyestrone, which actually damages DNA and increases the risk. And so to help lower that metabolite, I typically recommend like broccoli sprouts and B vitamins to really help support and keep that metabolite low. So if women are having that breakthrough bleeding, it's really, really important they get those estrogens checked out to make sure that there isn't an increased risk, because estrogen receptors are all over the body. They're not just in the breast, the uterus. They're also, thyroid, bones, intestines, lungs, everywhere. But yeah, especially, if you're experiencing that breakthrough bleeding, you want to make sure that there's no uterine cancer that's present.
Definitely. And getting a transvaginal ultrasound would be a good way to check the millimeter, the lining of the endometrium.
Right. That is a good point. Yeah. Doing that ultrasound, because then if there's excess estrogen that is present, then it's going to be thickening up that uterine lining, which should not be happening in menopause.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Okay, so you mentioned some of the symptoms with the cramping, the PMS, the weight gain, and then from there, and endometriosis, fibroids can also be seen, and some of the things that we can look at, nutritional deficiencies, gut health. You want to look for, the insulin resistance, checking insulin levels. I think those are all great. And then if you're have xenoestrogen exposures. And so give me some things where that's readily found. Like some people I know, like home and other places.
Yeah. So definitely in our home, it starts with the products we're using on our body. So our makeup, our shampoo, body washes, things that we're using every day. That's where xenoestrogens are found, like parabens, stuff like phthalates, anything that has a fragrance, you definitely want to avoid. So when it says fragrance on the bottle, it's like red flag, because it's like, what are they hiding? Why not just list out the ingredients that's contributing to the fragrance?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely looking at the products that you're using in your on your body, but also in your home too. So things that you're using to clean the house with, that's another source of xenoestrogens. Also plastic plastic storage containers, plastic water bottles, even nonstick cookware contains a lot of chemicals that contribute to xenoestrogens. So that the first step is like looking in your home and seeing what could be contributing. And I know it's like, it can be overwhelming to start clearing everything out and starting from scratch. Yeah. And then when I learned about xenoestrogens too, I was like, oh my goodness, I just wanted to get rid of everything. But I realized, I'm like, okay, it's not effective to do that cost wise. And so I just started with the products I was using one by one, little by little. Oh, and laundry detergent too. So other things. So I just slowly started swapping out like my toothpaste and my body wash, my shampoo, the laundry detergent. Then we moved over to the kitchen and started swapping things out in the kitchen. And there's a lot of great resources out there too that can be helpful, because it's like, okay, if you're not sure the products that you're using might contain some xenoestrogens or dirty chemicals, there are great resources like the Environmental Working Group. I also love Think Dirty app because it has a scanner in the app. So you can actually go through all the products you have in your home and scan each one. If they pop up, awesome, you can see the list. If not, you can search for them. So I would use those two databases. Yeah. Think Dirty. Yep.
Think Dirty. And it's an app. Dirty.
Yeah, it's an app that you download on your phone, which has a scanner inside the app. And another app that also has a scanner is called Yuka, Yuka. So I like to use those two because, I mean, thankfully they're still building and growing their database. So if you can't find it in one, you can jump over to the other. But yeah, at least with the barcode feature, it's amazing. It makes it so much easier. Yeah, to scan the products you're using. And then when you're in the grocery store and searching for products to swap them out for, you can scan right there when you're in a grocery store as well to find better products. So that way you're not like, wait, I'm like in this section, but I'm not sure if these are clean or not. So, and sometimes they'll be mixed in with each other too. So you have to be careful with that. But yeah, using those apps when you're on the go, and the Yuka too. And the benefit of Yuka is not only looking at your personal care products and stuff you're using in the home, but you can also scan foods that you're eating as well. So I like that one for that feature.
Good. Do you know Flav City? Flav City. He's on Instagram. He talks he cooks a lot, and he talks about, all the non-toxic stuff. He'll go to like Costco and, he will say, this is really good, but this one isn't because it's got this ingredient. And so if you're into food or if you're a foodie at all, then I recommend him. But the reason I'm bringing him up is because he has an app that he created. I think maybe it's called Bobby Approved. And you scan things to know if it's got horrible ingredients, foods.
Food-wise,
yeah. I think it's only food right now. And so I haven't tried it because I'm always reading anyway. But I think that a lot of people just they're not reading at all the ingredients. They're just like putting it into, they're just used to buying certain products that actually aren't really good for you. And it's just part of their normal thing. But, they don't realize it wouldn't say glyphosate on there, but cereals, Lucky Charms, all of those things, Cheerios have glyphosate in them. And it's just horrible for you. It's horrible for you. So anyway, Flav City, I think it's Bobby Approved. Maybe that's what it's called. When I find it, I'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to check that one out. I'm open to different apps that make these things a lot easier, because it's a lot of information. It can be overwhelming, but these apps do a great job of just really breaking it down, making it simple. Cause like in Think Dirty, it'll flag it green, yellow, or red. So when you see like something that has a lot of yellow and red, you definitely want to avoid that. But when you see something that's like all green, even if you don't even know what the ingredient is, you're like, okay, this is good. And I can just keep going. Right. So it definitely makes it so much easier.
Yes, definitely. All right. So let's see. Was there anything that we missed?
Well, I did want to talk about another xenoestrogen that's not necessarily like in our home, but it can be in our bodies. Not everybody, but women that opt for breast implants. So this is something that's like where women are becoming more and more aware of, with a big movement of like breast implant illness. So I'm not saying it happens to every woman, but there are some women that after getting breast implants, whether it's a few months after or even years after, start developing these weird symptoms. And they're almost like autoimmune like symptoms. But when they go to the doctor, they get testing, like everything comes back fine. But it's something to think about, because the breast implants, at the end of the day, they're foreign bodies. And anytime there's a foreign body in our body is going to try to either get rid of it or wall it off. And so they can't get rid of the breast implant. So what it does, it creates this wall, this capsule around the implant. But these implants, whether they are filled with saline or silicone, both types have a silicone outer capsule.
Right.
And this silicone is very, very porous. And so these breast implants do have a lot of chemicals in them, to create, the capsule and what's inside. So there's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of heavy metals that are in these implants. And because the silicone capsule is very porous, they will come out of these implants. And then when the body is trying to protect itself from these implants, starts creating this capsule. But unfortunately, the body can only do so much, so a lot of women are exposed from these xenoestrogens from implants as well, which potentially can make them sick. So that's something also to think about. If you're a woman that have breast implants and just haven't been feeling well, you have all these weird, crazy symptoms and you've been to doctors and they can't really pinpoint what that is, it's definitely something to keep in the back of your mind. And yeah, you could try to do a detox, but ultimately, the body's going to keep fighting it. It's going to keep continuing to fight against it. And a lot of women find success once they get that removed. But that's definitely something to find a practitioner that's supportive of and to have that conversation with, because I think it's definitely something that's important that needs to be, that we need to have awareness around, and to be addressed as well.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's so important. Breast implant illness I feel like I've just been hearing about it more and more women are aware, more women are getting their implants removed. And a lot of women just start to have symptoms, sometimes within a couple of months, sometimes it takes several years.
Right.
So it varies between women and women. But yes, thank you for bringing that up, because it's really such an important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And because there's the xenoestrogens and they cause imbalance in the hormones. So a lot of women will tend to develop estrogen dominance because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So how can people find you?
Yeah. So I am online at you can go to my website, yourradianthealth.com. I'm also on Instagram, Kate Vasquez _PA. You can find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook, but mostly active on Instagram. So if you have any questions, want to say hello, definitely pop in there. And in my book, Estrogen is a Bitch, I definitely dive more into, estrogen dominance, all the different things, the different root causes. I also dive into like the breast implants, the cancer, even autoimmune disorders. I dive into all those topics a little bit more in the book, as well as testing different supplements and things that you can do to really help support your hormones. And then 5 steps that women can start taking to naturally balance out their hormones. So I definitely highly recommend checking it out. You can find it on Amazon as well.
Oh, that's another book? Is that the title, or?
That's part of, that's in the book, the 5 steps to balance their hormone. Yeah, that's in the book, Estrogen is a Bitch. Yep.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think this was really it highlights everything about estrogen dominance, the symptoms, what you can do, what to avoid, to decrease your exposure to estrogen, and obviously also organic everything, especially dairy products and butter and milk. I'm not a big milk drinker at all, but I think that I'm not sure how many people really know how much hormones are pumped into these animals. Yeah. And then when you consume that, you're consuming those hormones and the antibiotics that all of these animals are being pumped with. It's really incredible. And it's definitely having an impact on our bodies. So everything grass-fed, organic chicken, everything should be organic for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And at the end of the day too, I just, I want women to understand like estrogen is not a bad hormone at all. In fact, I call it the Goldilocks hormones. Like we want to have the right amount of estrogen, not too little and not too much,
right.
Because like when we have an imbalance of estrogen, it can definitely cause problems on either end of the spectrum, So it's important that, if there's imbalance with your body, to get those hormones checked out and make sure the estrogen progesterone ratios look really good. Because if there's that imbalance there are things that we can do to support that, to help you feeling so much better.
Yes, absolutely. There is hope. Do not lose hope if you have estrogen dominance at all. All right, Kate, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. And I would love to have you back on again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I've had so much fun. Thank you so much for having me here today.
All right, you're welcome.
And well, I think if anything, you should know that being estrogen dominant is not a good thing. And so that's one of the things that I check for, practitioners check for in functional medicine. And we want to know, well, why? And how can we reverse that? You do not want to be estrogen dominant because of the risks of so many different things, whether it's fibroids or cancer. It's really something that's so vitally important. So whatever you learned today, I would love it if you can drop me a line and just let me know if this helped you. If you want to learn more about Kate, and she's got a really special offer about her book, head on over to the show notes at margaretromero.com/episode 202 and check all of that out. And I also have the apps that we mentioned as well in there. So I'll talk to you all next week. Thank you so much wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being here. If you have been inspired and have learned so much from these interviews, I would love for you to head on over to iTunes, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.